Welcome to the latest edition of the Football Happy Hour. Jeremy St. Louis, happy to have you along. Jenny Dell will be along shortly. On this edition, we're shifting the offseason focus over to the AFC East, which could be another highly competitive division to sort through in the 2022 season. And let's start at the top with the Buffalo Bills, who are once again heavy favorites to win the AFC East. And they are the betting favorites to win Super Bowl 57. And at OTAs, they're in great spirits. Josh Allen tossing dimes to Stephon Diggs. Big offseason acquisition, Von Miller imparting his wisdom, and the offense has a new coordinator in Ken Dorsey. He replaces Brian Dable, who left to take over fellow AFC East side, the New York Giants. The Bills head into the 2022 season as of right now as the betting favorites to lift the Lombardi Trophy. They are at plus 700, followed by Tampa Bay and Kansas City. Only two of the top six favorites are from the AFC. All right, let's chat about the Bills with CBS Sports NFL writer and reporter Tyler Sullivan. Tyler, after three straight double-digit winning seasons and playoffs in 4 of the past 5 seasons, the Bills know that time is running out to take that final step towards winning that Super Bowl. How do you feel about them at 7-1 to win it this season?
Well, it's never all fun to bet the favorite, right? You kind of want to get that sleeper in. You want to feel like you've plucked somebody from obscurity that's going to win it. But if you're ever going to pick one, it's the Buffalo Bills this season at 7-1 to win the Super Bowl. I mean, they have everything imaginable to contend to hoist that Lombardi Trophy in 2022. And they were really able to do it last year, too. I mean, they were 13 seconds away from going to the AFC Championship. It's just that Patrick Mahomes and his greatness got in the way. But make no mistake, the Buffalo Bills have an elite quarterback in Josh Allen. They have an elite defense with Tre'Davious White coming back from the torn ACL. They drafted a cornerback in the first round to go opposite of him. They bring in Von Miller, like you mentioned. They were already the #1 defense in DVOA last season. And then you add the likes of Von Miller. You're bringing back a guy like Tre'Davious White, who's an all-pro, Pro Bowl corner that can shut down opposing passing games. If they have those guys last year, they're going to the AFC Championship. They're taking on the Cincinnati Bengals. And for my money, they're probably beating them and giving the Rams a run for their money.
So obviously health issues and acquisition certainly going to help them. Let's talk about that quarterback, Josh Allen. Didn't throw for as many yards last season as he did in 2020. The completion percentage was down. Interceptions were up. He went from 5th most yards to 8th most. But, I mean, we are talking very, very small differences here. So where does Allen rank for you among the league's elite quarterbacks?
Yeah, I think we're splitting hairs a little bit, but that's what we're supposed to do with these elite quarterbacks. I mean, again, when you're talking about Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, you're really splitting hairs. They're both elite, but I do put Patrick Mahomes ahead of him. Josh Allen, to me, is right there at number 2 if you're rounding out a top 5. Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Justin Herbert, they're all in that elite category that, again, not so much Rodgers and Brady, but specifically Mahomes and Allen and Herbert on the come up, Joe Burrow even. If you're starting a franchise today and you're trying to build it with the quarterback, you're going to Josh Allen pretty quickly in this. I mean, not only is he able to do anything imaginable throwing the football, but better than Patrick Mahomes in this regard, he can run the football. He is a legitimate force out of the backfield with his legs. We've seen that over the course of his career. And I think it's going to be even more interesting next season now. You get a little bit of a different backfield. Obviously, you're bringing back Devin Singletary and Zach Moss, but you did draft Jake Cook, the brother of Dalvin Cook, in the 2nd round of the NFL draft. I do think that you're going to see a little bit more of an offensive attack in that backfield, and I think Josh Allen will certainly be part of that, which again just makes him an elite quarterback. Everything that he can do with his arms, certainly special. Can make every throw imaginable, can throw pretty much 70 yards down the field. But then when you start talking about that threat with his legs, it just makes him almost impossible to defend.
Tyler, would you be surprised if he was a guy who was a front runner for an MVP and did have better numbers this year than Patrick Mahomes, given the changes to the Chiefs offense and losing a guy like Tyreek Hill, but with the Bills pretty much standing pat in terms of their offense?
Yeah, no, he should absolutely still be the favorite here. I mean, again, there is something to be said for that salt in the wound, that loss that they felt last year in the divisional round. That's something that sticks with you, especially a guy like Josh Allen. I think he's a hyper-competitive individual, but he uses those losses to drive him forward. It's not something that kind of breaks you. I don't think he's that type of player at all. So when you're talking about when they have a Stephon Diggs, they have a Gabe Davis, who I think is going to make a big leap this year. Obviously, we saw what he was able to do in that playoff loss to the Kansas City Chiefs. But they also bring back Isaiah McKenzie. They bring in Jamison Crowder. They have some options there in that passing game. Obviously, Dawson Knox and O.J. Howard in the passing game at tight ends as well. I think he has plenty of weapons at his disposal. He's not in the division like Patrick Mahomes this season, where he's going to be duking it out with the Russell Wilsons, the Herberts, the Derek Carrs. He's going up against Mac Jones and Tua Tagovailoa and Zach Wilson. That's a little bit easier competition in terms of, two opponents every week there in terms of the AFC East. I think it's a much easier road for him to put up some numbers.
The big offseason signing for the Bills was on the defensive side of the ball. Linebacker Von Miller coming in, inked to a 6-year, $120 million deal. Miller only played 8 games last season with the Rams, but had 5 sacks, 27 tackles. What does his signing do for this Bills defense?
It's an embarrassment of riches. I mean, this team, like I said, this team was already the #1 defense in DVOA a year ago, and then you're adding a guy like Von Miller. I think it's a twofold impact. One, you just look on the field, and it's a legit all-world pass rusher where he is able to get after the quarterback in those crunch time moments. I mean, you look back at last season when you're in those playoff moments, when you're trying to make a stop with 13 seconds left against Kansas City, what helps Josh Allen more than anything imaginable is being able to disrupt the quarterback on the defensive side of the ball. We saw it in Denver over the course of most of his career. We saw it last year, obviously, as a member of the Los Angeles Rams as they were able to win a Super Bowl. He is able to make those timely plays, get after. When they get in those moments, Von Miller can calm the storm and say, hey, listen, guys, I've been here before. This is what we need to do. It is possible to go over this mountaintop for a franchise that I think might not feel like they can, even though all the pieces around them say that they can reach that mountaintop and hoist the Lombardi Trophy.
So Miller was the marquee acquisition, but they've added mostly on the offensive side of the ball. When you look at the additions, is there an underrated move this offseason that you think could put the Bills over the top?
Yeah, I think it's Jamison Crowder. And I've said this a couple of times. I think I've said it on HQ. I think I've said it on Pick 6. I think that Jamison Crowder is the most underrated signing in the AFC. What he's been able to do as a member of the New York Jets, and we all know the quarterback history with New York, whether it's Sam Darnold, Joe Flacco, a rookie in Zach Wilson last year. You look at what Jamison Crowder has been able to put up. It's just been a great slot receiver for them. And the numbers with subpar quarterbacks around him only makes that more impressive, especially when you start to fantasize what it's going to look like when he's going from Zach Wilson to Josh Allen, the MVP favorite in the NFL, and the role that he's going to play in this offense. Cole Beasley's gone. Emmanuel Sanders is gone. There are plenty of targets there in the slot, especially when you look at Beasley. He's had over 100 targets the last 3 seasons. If you're telling me Jamison Crowder is going to get 100 targets from Josh Allen and his ability to get open in the short field, he's not only somebody who I think is going to make the Buffalo Bills offense that much better, because I do think it's an improvement going from Beasley to Crowder, but he's someone I'm looking at in fantasy in those later rounds. I mean, just on PPR points alone in those receptions, you're looking at possibly 5 to 6 to 7 points each week, and that's not even counting what he'll do as a member in the red zone or even in the yardage portions. Just those target shares alone from a guy like Josh Allen, to me, is fascinating to see what they're going to do with Jamison Crowder.
And as you mentioned, O.J. Howard added as well, which certainly gives him another weapon at the tight end position. Okay, what about on the other side of that coin? What move have they made that has you kind of scratching your head?
Yeah, and this one's through no fault of their own. Again, I think they had a great offseason. They didn't really have to do too much. Again, this was already a complete roster, a Super Bowl contender last year. But the weird J.D. McKissick, missing out on him, it was during the legal tampering period where it seemed like they had a verbal agreement, and then all of a sudden he's back with the Washington Commanders, and we're like, wait a minute, what happened? And that certainly was not looked at too favorably by the front office in Buffalo, and they said as much. But ultimately, I think that is one where I think you might regret not trying to really hammer that home. Again, through no fault of their own, but something that I think that they should have looked at there. Because now they bring in Duke Johnson, and again, veteran guy, veteran pass catching back, but not to the level of J.D. McKissick, who again, very similar to Jamison Crowder, would be going from subpar quarterbacks throughout his time in Washington to now with Josh Allen. I think that combo is a receiving back in that backfield on top of Devin Singletary and Zach Moss. That is something that I thought would have been fascinating to see unfold. They did draft James Cook, so if he's anything like his brother, that really won't mean much that they miss out on J.D. McKissick. But again, that one, I think it would have been something that we're going to look back at and say, man, if they had a weapon like that, a pass catcher like that for Josh Allen, the sky's the limit even more than it already is.
The Bills have a pretty tough stretch in October when looking at their schedule. I mean, they have the Steelers, the Chiefs, then they come off their bye versus the Green Bay Packers. When you look at that schedule overall, what's that stretch of games for Buffalo that gives you the most concern?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think it's right out of the gate in that first 6 weeks, kind of leading into the bye. 4 of those games are on the road, including week 1, the season opener in Los Angeles against the Rams. Historically, that is a really tough spot for a visitor. When you look at it against the spread or straight up, the home team rides that adrenaline of seeing the banner unveiled, the juice of that championship from a year ago, ready to defend their title. That is something that really is a factor in these games. You go back, I think like 20 years, I think they're like 18-3 or something like that, straight up in terms of the home teams, the defending Super Bowl champions in those games. So that's a tough spot there for Buffalo to be put in. But then even you go a little bit further there. You're facing a Titans team that was the #1 seed a year ago. We don't know what the Dolphins will look like next year with Tua Tagovailoa surrounded with all these weapons, but you are playing in Miami, which is always a little bit tricky when you look at that weather. The Ravens will be back, especially when you're going on the road and facing them in Baltimore. The Steelers, they should be able to get a win there. Again, the quarterback situation is still up in the air with Kenny Pickett and Mitchell Trubisky, but that defense will certainly give Josh Allen headaches throughout the course of that afternoon. And then, of course, going to Kansas City, no one really ever wants to do that. So that first chunk there is extremely difficult. And like you said, I know they have the bye, but then they face the Green Bay Packers there too. So that first 6 to 8 weeks, including the bye, which is a poorly placed bye for them too, that is a tough draw for them right out of the gate.
So based on that schedule, give us a record in terms of a prediction for the Bills this season.
I think they go 13-4. And again, I think that might be good enough for them to win the #1 seed in the conference. And we referenced it a little bit. That first kind of chunk there is where I think they lose a large portion of those games. I think that Rams game is going to be difficult. I think that the Chiefs game in Kansas City is going to be difficult. I think the Packers on Sunday Night Football is going to be difficult. Even later on in Week 17, when they go to Cincinnati to face the Bengals on Monday Night Football, those are all very losable games for them. So I'll put those games as losses for them, as 4 losses. But again, they could win those. Maybe you lose one to the Patriots or other division rival, you kind of fall one there. But I think 13-4 overall is where you find the Buffalo Bills this season.
Okay, so we know they're 7-1 to win the Super Bowl. -180, you see the odds there to win the division. +360 to win the AFC. When you look at the futures market, I mean, what bet are you chasing? Are you going for a team bet or are you looking at a player prop?
I'm going to go individual here for Buffalo because, again, it's not always fun to, you can bet the Super Bowl one, sure, 7-1, still pretty good odds there. The division, I think, is, there's not a ton of value there, especially with all those teams on the come up. The Patriots added some people, obviously the Dolphins did as well, and the Jets had a really good draft. You never know what can happen there. It's not fun to bet a favorite in May for the division because you just don't know what's going to happen. One thing I do love, though, is comeback player of the year, Tre'Davious White at 30-1. For me, that makes more sense than a couple of those other guys that we see that have even worse odds than that. Like, for instance, Deshaun Watson is 7-1 to win comeback player of the year. That makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. I don't think he's going to get a single vote in that regard. Meanwhile, Tre'Davious White, an all-pro, former all-pro corner, Pro Bowl corner. He tore his ACL last season. If he comes back and plays out of the gate in Week 1 and is the leader of this defense in that secondary that was already a top-flight unit in the NFL a year ago, you're looking at somebody who could easily cash on this prop. And again, it's a little bit of a long shot at 30-1. But again, you look at this list a little bit, and there are guys that just make absolutely no sense. Like Derrick Henry, he's the favorite. He returned last year. He played last season. He returned. He already came back. I don't know what we're talking about here. And again, Deshaun Watson, that makes no sense to me either. I would much rather do a long shot in Tre'Davious White for comeback player of the year here more than most of the other on the board.
Yeah, it cashed nicely at 30-1. He is CBS Sports NFL writer, reporter Tyler Sullivan talking about the Buffalo Bills in the AFC East as we get rolling here on the Football Happy Hour. Here are the notable odds for the Bills this season. Speaking of that futures market, their win total set at 11.5. Tyler thinks 13-4 is actually a good number for them. That's what he's pitching them at. -180 to win the division, +360 to win the conference, 7-1 to win the Super Bowl. And if you like Josh Allen to be the MVP, all the weapons are in place. Allen also 7-1 to take the top honor for players in the NFL. Well, we're not done with Tyler or the AFC. New England quarterback Mac Jones has been the talk of Patriots OTAs after showing up slimmer and trimmer. The team reportedly ecstatic with what they've seen from Jones this offseason. He's been beating coaches to the practice facility, organizing workouts with his receivers, including new addition Devontae Parker, the once Big Mac, coming off a rookie season that saw him pass for just over 3,800 yards, 22 touchdowns, 13 picks. Here's Kendrick Bourne on a more svelte-looking Jones.
Yeah, Mac, and he's also in shape. Everything you said, yeah, is way better, and he's in the best shape of his life. I think he's been here all off season with Moses, so he looks really good. His stomach is gone.
Yeah, I think every year you want to do like a self-diagnosis of how you felt for the games, your body fat, all that stuff. And for me, just cleaning up my diet, and I've learned more this offseason than I probably ever have about nutrition, sleep, wellness, all that stuff.
So less Big Macs for Big Mac. Lots of good feelings and fun at spring OTAs. You hear them laughing and having a good time. For more on the Patriots, let's bring back Tyler Sullivan, CBS Sports NFL writer and reporter. Tyler, what are your thoughts on the slimmer, trimmer Jones?
Well, it needed to happen. I mean, again, this is somebody who it's like all rookies. I mean, you go, of course, over the course of any sport, really. You go to the NBA, NFL. All these guys that come into the league, they're still babies. They're still young kids. You kind of got to get rid of that baby fat. You go into a little bit more of a professional diet. You start to take it a little bit more seriously. And I think that's exactly what Mac Jones should be doing. I mean, we've seen this with a lot of guys. They change their diet. They're starting to work with dietitians. They get their own personal chefs. This is something that I think Mac Jones should do. Again, this isn't the old school days where they're having some cigarettes on the sidelines or anything like that. This is, again, you're taking care of your body. It is a investment that you're putting into on a week in and week out basis. And for Mac Jones last season, a couple of times there, he was getting banged up. I mean, at the beginning of the season, I think he was dealing with a little bit of something in the lower body. And then towards the tail end, I thought he was getting banged up a little bit too with that offensive line. So this is something that, again, he needs to take care of now over the course of the offseason. Recoup, get yourself in peak physical condition, because that will make you last much longer over the course of an 18-week schedule, and also make yourself a more productive quarterback during each and every down in every series when you're playing in those games too.
I mean, we've all seen the picture of Tom Brady, right, before the combine, when, that photo of him, he's tried to have it scrubbed from the internet. But, I mean, maybe he's investing in the TB12 method. Who knows with Jones? You heard the stats there, 3,800 yards, just over, 22 touchdowns. He led all rookie quarterbacks in those categories. I mean, he's been mentioned already by folks at NFL Network as a dark horse candidate for MVP. I mean, so when you look at Jones, what's the floor, what's the ceiling for 2022?
I mean, Bill Belichick would certainly love if he gets an MVP out of number 15 overall pick in Mac Jones. Again, that would be something that I think everybody in New England would enjoy, especially after the last couple of years here, where you're still wondering about, is he the guy? Is he gonna take that second year leap? But if he does live up to his potential, I believe, if you're talking about gold jacket level of, the peak performance of Mac Jones, I think you're looking at something similar to Drew Brees. Mac Jones is not a mobile quarterback in the new age sense, like a Josh Allen who we were talking about in the previous segment. He's not anybody like that, but he can move around the pocket well. He's a pure passer. The biggest thing is his accuracy. He can throw it pretty much anywhere on the football field that he wants to. And more than anything, he's intelligent. He has a high football IQ, which is something that I think the New England Patriots were really fascinated with in the pre-draft process last year. So for me, if he is able to reach all of these heights, you're talking about someone who is looking a little bit like Drew Brees. If you want to come down a little bit to something a little bit more realistic, which I think is probably more the case here, I think you're looking at a Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins type of guy. Certainly talented, certainly able to get you wins in the National Football League, but other things around him will need to be perfect for them to truly contend in the postseason, truly contend for a Super Bowl. He needs to have a number one wide receiver, needs to have a good coaching staff like he does, needs to have a strong offensive line. He's able to win, but he needs more things around him. It's not like Tom Brady where you can surround him with basically nothing at certain points of his tenure in New England, and they're still winning Super Bowls. I don't think they're ever going to get that from Mac Jones, but I do think that you can get a Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr type of player and still be able to contend for championships. And then if he hits the floor, I mean, you're looking at what? The latest version of Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen, immobile type of quarterback that regresses after a somewhat promising first year and really never recovers.
Well, it certainly doesn't look like that with the way that he's kind of come into the second season with OTAs. And hey, if you're going to hand me that Kirk Cousins bag, I'll take that comparison, absolutely. All right, this Patriots offense, they've been middle of the pack or worse for each of the past 3 seasons. The big question going into 2022 is who's going to be calling the plays. Bill Belichick has yet to name a new offensive coordinator since Josh McDaniels went to the Raiders. Is Bill going to be calling plays here, Tyler?
It'll be interesting if he does. Again, that's a wild card here. That is certainly, I feel like, on the table, but I do have some concerns with that too. I mean, again, if Bill Belichick is coming down to call plays for this offense, well, then he's going to be stretched a little bit too thin. How does that impact the overall team? Again, you should be overseeing the operations and kind of pulling the strings from the sideline, not actually being someone that's getting the strings pulled. So for me, again, that would be fascinating to see how that goes with Bill Belichick running the offense from a play calling standpoint, but I don't know if that's legitimately possible, again, just because of what he's doing for the rest of the roster there and the overall roster construction. Even on the defensive side of the ball, there is no defensive coordinator in name. They do have his son Steve Belichick and obviously Gerard Mayo, but there's still no clear-cut leader on that side of the ball either, so I do think he kind of needs to be still up on that perch. The one thing that's concerning, though, is that play calling duties, because if it's not Belichick, it's probably going to be Joe Judge or Matt Patricia. In either way, that's extremely concerning. Unlike previous times when the Patriots didn't have a quote-unquote offensive coordinator, you kind of knew who was running the show, whether it was Josh McDaniels before he had that title, Bill O'Brien before he had that title. You knew that those were going to be the guys. Now we have no idea, and even if it's Joe Judge or Matt Patricia, we don't know what kind of guy they're going to be in terms of offensive play calling. Neither one of them have done it in the NFL. Matt Patricia has play calling experience, but that's on the defensive side of the ball. Joe Judge doesn't have any. And Joe Judge is working with the quarterbacks this offseason. He's working with Mac Jones. And I think that that's the one that should be alarming the most if we're just looking at prior history. You look at when he was the head coach of the New York Giants, they were 31st his 2 years as head coach in total yards and total points. And over that stretch, they had Daniel Jones, another first-round quarterback. I think if you asked anybody who watches the NFL over the last few years, you would say that Daniel Jones has either regressed or he's plateaued. He has not ascended as a first-round quarterback you would hope to see him do over his career. Hasn't happened yet. You've even had Giants ownership say that they've done everything possible to screw that quarterback up. And one of those things that they screwed up in was putting him with Joe Judge. And now you have Mac Jones with Joe Judge, and I just don't know how that's going to look. I think that might hurt the development of Mac Jones if it's the same kind of coach that we saw in New York lead an abysmal offense, now running the show here in New England.
Well, and it's certainly getting late in the process as well. So, I mean, you've got to have somebody at least part of the duties, share the duties. Who knows what Bill's planning to do. But as you mentioned, a going concern as to what's going to happen with this offense and how productive they can be depending on who's calling the plays. Okay, Malcolm Butler, Jabril Peppers, Ty Montgomery. Few of the signings that they've had this offseason for you. What's the best offseason move the Patriots have made?
We'll stick with the offense. I think it's Devontae Parker, and it really just comes back to Mac Jones. I mean, again, when you have a young quarterback, you want everything to go right. You want to set up everything imaginable so he can develop the best way possible. We've expressed our concerns about the coaching staff. One thing that we can't really express too much concern about is the overall talent around him. Again, they don't have a clear-cut number one. I'm not going to say Devontae Parker is this legit number one type of receiver, but he's certainly better than what they had last year. And it's certainly better than what they've had really in the last few years. And I think his presence as somebody who can stretch the field is a legitimate threat to an opposing defense that they at least have to account for. I think that makes life easier for the rest of the roster. It kind of slots Kendrick Bourne, Nelson Aguilar, Jacoby Myers, Tyquan Thornton, the rookie second-round pick. I think it slots them into more realistic roles, and especially with the tight ends being so prevalent in a Patriots offense, with Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry coming off a promising year. Jonnu Smith needs to kind of rebound off of a poor season. But there's a lot of talent there in the passing game for Mac Jones to succeed, and I do think that Devontae Parker's presence alone makes things a little bit more organized in that offense.
With former first-rounder N'Keal Harry not even at OTAs, I mean, you look at Parker there. I mean, Parker's going to be the one that's probably going to be slotting into his position. Who knows what the future holds for Harry at this point. Okay, losses on this team include J.C. Jackson, Chase Winovich, Kyle Van Noy. When you look at who's left this team, what's been the most questionable move this offseason?
Well, the low-hanging fruit here is Cole Strange in the first round, right? The guard out of Chattanooga, Tennessee. But I do think that you can put that one off to the side a little bit. If they like the player, they like the player. We'll find out in a few years if that is actually a questionable move by them, even though, it had us scratching our heads on draft night. For me, the biggest thing with this team is that they have not replaced J.C. Jackson, who signed a massive deal with the Los Angeles Chargers. Every time the Patriots have moved on from a cornerback, their top cornerback, which has been relatively common over the course of Belichick's tenure over the last few years, there has been a guy in place that you can point to say, okay, there's a chance that he ascends to be the number one guy. When it was Malcolm Butler, who was the Super Bowl hero, he ascended after Darrelle Revis left to be the number one guy. And then when Malcolm Butler left, you had Stephon Gilmore already waiting in the wings to truly be that number one defensive player of the year type of player. Then when you traded away Stephon Gilmore last year, you had J.C. Jackson as a legit all-pro corner playing for you right now. I don't know what it's going to look like in week one, but if you're kind of trying to pencil in that depth chart at the moment, it looks like it's probably going to be Malcolm Butler, and that's not the Malcolm Butler that we saw a few years ago when he's picking off Russell Wilson in the Super Bowl or being a Pro Bowler in the years prior to that. It's a totally different player who barely even played last season because he was dealing with off-the-field issues. He semi-retired, and now he's coming back. It's a totally different player, but he's being asked to be in that same role, which I think is a tall ask for him in this Patriots secondary. So for me, when you're in a conference like the AFC that we've seen load up with quarterback talent, with wide receivers coming into not only in the conference, but in the division, when you have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle in one offense, I don't know how you're going to keep up with those type of players. And when you're going up against Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis and Jamison Crowder, I don't know how you're keeping up with them with that secondary as it's currently constructed, because they really don't have that number one shutdown guy.
Yeah, Malcolm Butler brought in Terrence Mitchell, also signed on a free agent deal from Houston 1 year for $3 million. So he's another addition to the secondary. The Patriots had 10 draft picks this past draft. You mentioned Cole Strange. They had 3 fourth-rounders. When you look at the rookie class overall, I mean, who are you betting on to have the biggest impact here?
I don't even know if I'm betting on it, but it's more just he has to be good, is Tyquan Thornton. And it's not even for the 2022 season. It's for the overall approach of the New England Patriots under Bill Belichick over the last few years. The second-round pick out of Baylor, it just has to work. You look at this history of this team drafting wide receivers, it is absolutely not pretty. I mentioned it a little while ago. N'Keal Harry, the 2019 first-round pick, has not lived up to that whatsoever. He requested a trade last season, hasn't happened, but his future with the team is looking bleak. Just for a morale of the front office and the morale of this developmental front office and this group and these scouts and these evaluators with this team, the Tyquan Thornton pick needs to work. He has something that the Patriots desperately need in speed. He was the fastest wide receiver in terms of 40 time at the NFL Scouting Combine. He certainly brings that, but he is a skinnier type of player. He's not this big, muscular type of player. He does need to put on a little bit of weight there. But for me, Tyquan Thornton needs to work out for this New England Patriots team. He can show some flashes and doesn't have to be this absolute stud Jamar Chase type of player in year one. But if he can stretch the field, actually use his speed to their advantage, I think that will help the Patriots in the long term.
Tough start to the season for the Pats. 3 of their first 4 games are on the road at Miami, Pittsburgh, and then Green Bay. In those road games, home to the Ravens is where they come in between there. What stretch of the games is a concern for you when you look at their schedule?
Yeah, I think it's later on in the season. And if you look at their schedule, there's a primetime gauntlet kind of bunched all together later in the year. That's weeks 12 through 16. I mean, they're going up against the Minnesota Vikings on Thanksgiving in Minnesota. You're facing the Bills for the first time. You're going to Arizona to face the Cardinals. You're going to Las Vegas to face Josh McDaniels and the Las Vegas Raiders. To me, that is just an absolute onslaught of 4 primetime games for them. And then at the end of it, when they're not in primetime, they have to go to Cincinnati to face actually, they're facing the Cincinnati Bengals in Gillette Stadium, but still, the reigning AFC champions coming into your building. I just think that is a absolutely brutal stretch there. The moment you feel like you can get a sigh of relief after taking on that emotional game of Josh McDaniels versus Bill Belichick, you're going and facing Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and all those boys in Cincinnati. I mean, I don't know what they did to the schedule makers, but boy, that is a gut punch coming out of that primetime gauntlet.
All right, well, since 2003, the Patriots have only had one season where they had less than double-digit wins. So in terms of their record, what do you think 2022 holds in store? And when you look at a futures bet, I mean, what are you kind of looking at there?
Yeah, I think they go 10-7, 9-8. I think that's possible for them, and again, that 10-7 is them sweeping the Miami Dolphins. And for Tua Tagovailoa's criticisms that he gets, he has swept the Patriots throughout the course of his career. He swept them last year in their 2 matchups. So again, it's kind of rare if you're saying, oh, they're going to sweep the Dolphins to go 10-7. So maybe it's 9-8, whatever you want to put it there. But ultimately, I do think that 10-7 is roughly the mark there for the Patriots. But if you're looking for a futures bet, in that same breath, I do think that there's value in them winning the division at 4-1. I do think that there is something to be said for maybe Mac Jones living up to that MVP type of leap in year 2. Who knows what could happen there? And obviously, the Buffalo Bills are 1 injury away under center from things absolutely derailing for them. So again, 4-1, I would guess that is probably the best odds that Bill Belichick has had in the last 20 years to win his own division with the Patriots. So for me, again, you're really banking on Bill Belichick being right with all of the pieces that he's put together, all the chess moves that he's made. You're banking on him being right with all the things that he's done, and you're banking on a Mac Jones type of, not a seismic leap, but a noticeable leap in year 2. And you could say, all right, the Patriots, they were the number 1 seed at one point last season. Maybe they actually do make a run at the Bills here for the division. And if you're sitting at a 4-1 ticket, that's pretty good value.
He is CBS Sports NFL writer reporter Tyler Sullivan tackling the first half of the AFC East for us here on the Football Happy Hour. Thanks, Tyler. In terms of the Patriots schedule, you heard that going concern near the back end of the Patriots schedule for Tyler. You see them Cardinals, Raiders, against Josh McDaniels, Sunday Night Football, then the Bengals, then the Dolphins, then the Bills. That is quite a finish to the season for the Patriots. Tyler's still thinking they're good for a 10-7 record.
Well, the Tua experiment continues in Miami. Tagovailoa has received praise from new Dolphins head coach Mike McDaniel for his play and work ethic throughout this offseason, despite some poor videos put out by the Dolphins social team. There's some questions about that. Newly acquired wide receiver Tyreek Hill immediately had low expectations for Tua, but he has been thoroughly impressed. Take a listen.
I mean, it's nothing weird. At first I thought it was going to be something crazy, the ball going all over the place, but Tua actually has, probably one of the prettiest balls I've ever caught in my life. So it's very catchable. I don't want to concede it because the more I talk, the more it sounds weird. So Tua is a very accurate quarterback. That's all I'm going to say.
All right, we're going to continue this Football Happy Hour with our Jonathan Jones. Now, JJ, how would you categorize Tua entering year 3?
Well, listen, I think the best that we can see of Tua when he's healthy is sort of a game manager. And I know that is a term that a lot of people think is almost a football pejorative. It's not. You can win with a game manager, right? Jimmy Garoppolo isn't a superstar, and he was up by double digits on the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl before they lost it. You can actually win with a healthy game manager, and that's what I think Mike McDaniel wants to see out of Tua Tagovailoa here in his 3rd season in the NFL, their first season together. They want to see a guy who, okay, he's not going to take a whole lot of risks, a whole lot of chances, and so that means that you're going to be able to control the football. You believe in what you're building there with GM Chris Greer, and so as long as Tua doesn't make those fatal mistakes, as long as when you do need to hit the big home run type pass, he hits it, and he puts and allows the defense to be in not disadvantaged situations when they don't score on offense. I think all of those things would really show, frankly, a leap for Tua. And again, Jenny, I can't express this enough. He needs to stay healthy.
Yeah, health is obviously key in this, and you got to look at his first 2 seasons in the NFL. You have a defensive-minded coach in Brian Flores, so obviously with the new coaching staff, you got Tyreek Hill there. He's hoping to turn things around in year 3. We're going to get to those topics in a second, but back to Tua right now. What level of pressure do you think he's facing this season? Because obviously, the pressure is on. He's got to win.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if it's on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being, no pressure and 5 being the most pressure, I think it's pretty close to a 4. I mean, we're talking about a guy who, Mike McDaniel took this job believing in what he could do with this offense. But more importantly, Stephen Ross, the owner of the Miami Dolphins, hired Mike McDaniel to bring this offense into the 21st century. Well, if he can't get it done with Tua, is it the coach or is it the quarterback? Is it the quarterback? that many people believe you shouldn't have drafted number 5 overall a couple of years ago, and instead you should have had Justin Herbert there sitting there, and he should be with the Miami Dolphins. That is always going to add pressure, and certainly last season added plenty of pressure there. When you continue to look at it, again, you have the health, and you've added Tyreek Hill, you have these weapons that are there, and it's an all-important year 3 for Tua. It's sort of like, hey, there are no more excuses anymore. And so because of all of that, I think the pressure is absolutely out of 4. Not that there is pressure that there would be a mid-season change necessarily. I think that Mike McDaniel is committed to Tua starting out and through the season. But as we have seen with so much quarterback movement in this NFL over the past couple of years, that after year 3, if this is the guy that we have seen for the better part of the past 2 years, the Miami Dolphins may very well decide to move forward and move on from him if that's the Tua that we get this year.
Yeah, it's funny how there's almost like this unspoken rule. Like you get 2 to 3 years to try to figure it out, and if not, you're out of there. And I mean, you think about Tua, he's been knocked for his size, his arm strength, but you look at what they've added this year in a player like Tyreek Hill. You also have your second-year speedster in Jalen Waddle. So what are your expectations for their offense, and particularly with Hill and Waddle?
Yeah, so listen, if you want to look at a Tyreek Hill and say how many receiving yards is he going to get, and you look at a Jalen Waddle and you wonder, okay, is he going to be able to repeat that 1,000-yard receiving season from last year? I think that Jalen Waddle can absolutely do that. I think that Waddle can be a 1,000-yard receiver. I just don't know that he's going to get it on as many receptions and targets. Remember, Jalen Waddle was getting targeted so much by Tua in that offense last season because they didn't really have a run game. So there was a lot of horizontal passing. Yes, Mike McDaniel is going to continue some of that, but hey, they got some dogs back there at the running back position, and they have fortified their offensive line, one that was very, very bad last season, one of the worst 3 in the NFL. And so I think that we can still see that production from Jalen Waddle, just not, I think we're going to see a higher yards per reception. Meanwhile, for Tyreek Hill, it's really, really hard for me to sit here and tell you that Tyreek Hill is going to have more receiving yards than he did in a season with Patrick Mahomes as his number 1 target when you have a young quarterback, a young wide receiver in Jalen Waddle. But even beyond that, the issue, and we kind of joked about it earlier, Tua doesn't have that strong of an arm. Patrick Mahomes is top 2 in the NFL in terms of how far he can throw the football, along with Josh Allen, and he may very well be number 1. I'm waiting on that skills competition, but Tua can't throw the football as far as Patrick Mahomes. That's just a fact. And so are we going to see the big home run hits with Tyreek Hill and Tua Tagovailoa like we saw in Kansas City? And then finally, they have Mike Gesicki, the franchise-tagged tight end. They have Cedric Wilson over there, who they just got in free agency. And so those guys are going to get you somewhere between 600 and 800 receiving yards this upcoming season. Once you start adding all this up and you add in the swing passes to the running backs, you're telling me that Tua Tagovailoa is going to have more than 5,000 5,000 passing yards this year? I don't think so. So maybe the numbers are going to be a little bit lower than you would expect.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you get, as you said, the comparison between Patrick Mahomes, you have a little bit of a different quarterback under center there. What about a questionable move that the Dolphins made this offseason? I have a feeling you're going to shock the world with this one.
I think maybe if you want to raise a question, it's Tyreek Hill. I mean, listen, there's no, okay, just what we talked about, right? We're talking about a Tyreek Hill and an offense with a limited quarterback when it comes to arm strength. I mean, Tyreek Hill's the guy who's going to blow by defenders. You want to play the too high coverage on him. Well, that's okay. My quarterback will still throw it farther than your deep safety. Well, I don't know that this quarterback can necessarily do that, but it's not just bringing on Tyreek Hill, because if it's as binary as are the Dolphins a better team with or without Tyreek Hill? They are certainly a better team with Tyreek Hill. But are they better suited and better positioned for their future by giving a 4-year record-breaking contract to a 28-year-old receiver who we only know can be successful with the greatest young quarterback in NFL history? It's obviously a gamble, and it may very well pay off for the Dolphins, and they will be better because of Tyreek Hill. But you can't, in the salary cap era, you can't just look at this and say, well, we have that player, they'll be better. We can't question that move. For the health of the overall team, that's why I question the move just a little bit when you consider what they gave up, what they gave him in a contract extension, and the quarterback he's paired with.
No, it makes total sense. I think Dolphins fans, though, the moment that happened, they were like, we finally have a chance, maybe. But who knows? Who knows? I totally see what you're saying there. What about an underrated offseason move by the Dolphins, something that people aren't talking about?
I'm going to keep you in the same position room, and I'm going to go with Cedric Wilson. And this is a guy who, he played for the Dallas Cowboys, and so I think a lot of folks got to know him a little bit. But it was a sneaky good signing in free agency by the Miami Dolphins. A 3-year, $22.5 million contract. I think it was very fair for both sides. You have a guy who can be a solid number 3. I think at a worse team, he could be a probably low-end 2. He's a guy who was 600 receiving yards. He had 6 touchdowns last season for the Cowboys in the absence of Michael Gallup. Really kind of took over there. And one sort of thing that he can do that not a lot of wide receivers can do as well, he can sling the football. He's 5 for 5 for 111 passing yards in his career with the Dallas Cowboys. That includes a touchdown pass in there. And so you want to get sophisticated and funky with Mike McDaniel and his offense, put the ball in Cedric Wilson's hands and let him throw it down the field once or twice.
Let him get funky. Yeah. In 3 seasons, Wilson recorded 67 receptions, 837 yards, 8 touchdowns. And when you think about it, you mentioned the Cowboys obviously there. You think about the group that was surrounding him there. So you're getting this really talented player that played in a strong offense. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. That's for sure. All right, we're going to move on to actual games now. So we still obviously have some time. But when you're looking at the overall Dolphins schedule, what stretch worries you the most?
Yeah, I'm worried about that week 14 to week 17 stretch because, listen, I don't know how great folks feel about the Miami Dolphins, but no matter what, you're looking at this team that they're going to have to finish strong in order to get into the postseason. And so we see that stretch right there where you're going to have to play the Chargers. And not only are you then going to have to turn around and play the Buffalo Bills, well, you're going to have to play in Buffalo. Then you get Green Bay. Then you have at New England. And these are difficult games, even if they were played on a neutral field. But what you have, and this is something that Tua talked about in sort of his exit interview last season, talking about how he needed to get better playing in inclement weather and conditions. Well, here you go, Tua. You get to play in December, heading into January in Buffalo and in New England, and got to have it divisional games. And so that is going to be a very, very tough test for this South Florida team. And again, you are playing against 4 teams that, would it surprise you if any of these 2 teams are in the Super Bowl? And so now you have 4 Super Bowl contenders that you're playing in tough conditions for 2 of them. Very difficult stretch for the Miami Dolphins.
I feel bad for whoever's on the sideline of those games. Now, with that stretch in mind, and that is not an easy stretch, give me your record prediction for the Dolphins for this season.
Gosh, I waffled back and forth on this. Are they an 8-9 team? Are they a 9-8 team? Is 9-8 going to get the job done in the AFC? Certainly, we look at it on paper and we say, well, probably not. However, the AFC can certainly beat up on everybody and on themselves, and maybe 9 wins get you in. All right, maybe not. So, listen, I want to have them right there at 8.5. If I have to pick right now, I'm going to say 8-9. They have a really tough opening stretch as well. When you look at their schedule, where they have the Patriots, the Ravens, the Bills, and the Bengals as well. And so I talked about that Week 14 stretch, but man, until they get that gimme in Week 5 against the Jets, that might be some tough sledding for them. So I look over there and I see a half win here, a full win there, and I can get up to 8.5. You want to tell me that they're going to win 9 games? That's fine. They win 10. That is a very, very successful season, no matter if they make the playoffs or not.
All right, JJ, don't go anywhere. We got to finish this up in our next segment. So thank you for your time talking about the Miami Dolphins and what is going to be a very exciting season as we take a look at some notable odds when it comes to that team. The win total right now at 8.5. Winning the AFC East plus 400. Their Week 1 facing off against the New England Patriots. That takes place on September 11th in Miami. All right, as we continue our breakdown on this Football happy hour. The Jets are up next. They drafted Zach Wilson second overall in 2021. They expect him to grow both physically and mentally in year 2. He's already working on the physical after finishing last season at 208 pounds. The second-year quarterback has reported to OTAs at 221 pounds. Some more weight, maybe some more confidence there, and that he will certainly need as we take a look at his 2021 season. It was a struggle. He finished 30th out of 31 qualified passers in total QBR. He went 3-10 as a starter, 2,334 yards, 9 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. Not what you want to see from your number 2 overall pick. Let's welcome back our Jonathan Jones. All right, we're talking about the Jets. You hear about that sophomore slump, but the Jets are hoping to see some sophomore progress in their second overall pick from 2021. What are your expectations for him this season?
Yeah, I hope it's better. I hope that we see the Zach Wilson from later in the season than before the injury. And, I just go back to last season and in the offseason, their handling of Zach Wilson, sort of the contract dispute and how he went in there and was already late to training camp because of the contract dispute. Now, there wasn't that veteran leadership that he needed in that quarterback room. He had a bad offensive line. And so I'm not at all surprised that he struggled to start the season. I don't think anyone should have been surprised by that. Then he gets that injury. And, the Jets, I think, did the right thing, not just by holding him out while he was injured. I think and felt that they held him out a game extra just to let him get some of that confidence back because he was getting really battered and bruised out there. So my expectations for Zach Wilson, a beefier, bulkier Zach Wilson, is a guy who's going to have a little bit more stamina. Hopefully he's going to be able to maintain and retain his speed, but also a guy who's going to be back there with a little more confidence, a little bit more command of the offense, a little bit more comfort in that offense. And so here's hoping that he looks a whole lot more like the December Zach Wilson versus the October Zach Wilson.
Well, that definitely makes sense. And as you mentioned, he wasn't exactly put in the best situation. So they're trying to fix that. The front office bolstered his supporting cast this offseason. That includes improvement to the O-line. So what's your favorite move that they made?
Gosh, they made so many moves, right? And you can look because they needed to, and they had plenty of the cap space to do it. I really like the move they made for Laken Tomlinson. He's going to be the left guard there. They got him from San Francisco. He was a model of consistency there with the 49ers, a guy who only allowed 2 sacks last season at that left guard post. They had invested heavily in that position with Elijah Vera Tucker, trading back up in the first to get him 2 drafts ago. Now they're sliding Vera Tucker over to right guard, and they're bringing in Laken Tomlinson, who knows how well he can play that left guard position. And that's important, obviously, for the running game, for Michael Carter, for Breece Hall that they just got in the second round. But it's also, of course, important for Zach Wilson, a guy that we can say and accuse him of having some happy feet back there. Again, he developed a number of bad habits. Number 1, because he played at BYU behind a fantastic offensive line, but number 2, because he was behind one of the worst offensive lines at times last season. And so he can break those bad habits in this offseason and trust that he's going to be able to step up into the pocket for the first time in his young professional career. I love that they brought on Laken Tomlinson.
Yeah, Tomlinson inked a 3-year, $40 million deal. Around that includes a $27 million guarantee. So they're putting some money into that position to help out Zach, of course. All right, then you have to look at the draft. So which Jets rookie do you think will make an instant impact and really help them out in year 1?
I don't think there's any doubt about it. It's the swaggiest dude that they just brought in the draft.
Saucy?
It's Sauce Gardner, okay? Hey, listen, he has the sauce, he has the drip, he has the swag, he has it all. I love this player out of Cincinnati, a guy who more than 1,000 passes were thrown his way, and he did not give up a single touchdown. They need that sort of mentality back there. But this is a team that gave up the most points last year. They gave up the most yards last year. They had the second fewest turnovers of any team in the NFL. They had the third fewest interceptions of any team. They allowed 30 or more points in 7 games last season. It's not just that one corner is going to solve all of those problems. They obviously had issues in their front 7 as well. But you could pass on the New York Jets, and you could pass on them again, and they couldn't stop you. And so now the Jets have a young corner in my estimation, the best corner in this year's draft, and that is going to help them take that next step that quarterbacks are hopefully going to have to think twice. Maybe not in week one. They're going to test the young rookie with the very cool nickname early on, but hopefully Sauce Gardner can show those quarterbacks, hey, you don't want to throw it my way. You want to think twice about throwing it my way, and that can only help the Jets defense.
You mentioned the nickname, got that nickname when he was just 6 years old, which is incredible. But yeah, definitely bringing the swag to this team and some talent as well. Now, it hasn't been easy for the Jets. They haven't made the playoffs since 2010, so it's been a while. Can we expect things to turn around? Like, what is holding this Jets team back from success?
It's hard to pinpoint one thing. You mentioned 2010. It has been a very, very long time for them. So to say that it's just one thing is impossible. However, if I have to pinpoint something, I would say that there was a lack of veteran leadership. I had mentioned earlier about them not having that veteran quarterback in the room when Zach Wilson needed it in July and August. And that's not just looking in hindsight and retrospect. We were all saying that in July and August. Why don't they have the vet that in the room that Zach Wilson can learn from, who knows his position there is to be the giver of knowledge and not really competing with the number 2 overall pick for playing time. Then they finally brought in Joe Flacco, who in this, the twilight of his career, I think he understands where he needs to be and what his team needs from him. But the Jets, even with all of their free agency moves over the past couple of years, they still, I don't think, have that guy on the team that can stand up in the middle of the locker room and say, hey, I've won 2 Super Bowl rings. I know what it takes, and here's what it takes. And maybe it's in week 7. Maybe it's in week 12. I just don't know that this is a team. They certainly haven't had it the past couple of years. I don't know that they have it this year, even though they have some championship caliber players on that roster and certainly some personnel and coaches who have plenty of rings to show for it as well. I just think that veteran leadership is something that has desperately been missing from a Jets team that, they keep trying to rebuild and rebuild. Well, sometimes you need those veterans in there who can bring the young guys along.
Yeah, that's so true. And you take a look at this Jets schedule, the first 4 games against AFC North teams. You got Baltimore, at Cleveland, Cincinnati, and at Pittsburgh. It's not easy. So when you look at their whole schedule together, what's your record prediction there? Give Jets fans some hope. No.
Listen, this is the season of optimism, right?
There we go.
So I'm going to be optimistic. I'm going to sit here and tell you that Zach Wilson is going to be able to connect with C.J. Uzomah, and that Breece Hall and Michael Carter will share the rock respectively back there in the backfield, and that they're going to figure out who needs to be on either side of the offensive line at the tackle position with Mekhi Becton. All those things said, I got the Jets at 6-11. You want to argue with me that they're going to win 7 games? Okay. Maybe, but it's going to be a tough road ahead for the New York Jets. Is that progress? It absolutely is progress. If Zach Wilson takes that next step, I think that's fantastic progress. I don't think that this is a Jets team or even reasonable Jets fans that are anticipating this has to be a playoff team. I don't think so at all. But you look at the start to that schedule, and that is very, very difficult. And you wonder when they're going to get their first win, and I understand all of that. But listen, it's hard in this league to start out 0-7, 0-8, 0-9. Even the worst of the worst teams don't do that. And so if you have the Jets win total at 5.5, I like the over here. I like 6. I like maybe even 7 if everything goes right. If Zach Wilson takes that step here in year 2.
I think Jets fans would be happy with that, maybe. Well, we'll see. You never know when it comes to these teams. That's what makes football so fun. JJ, always appreciate your time here on the Q. The Jets 0-12 in divisional games over the past 2 seasons. They're the only winless team in divisional games during that span. So maybe this will be the year for them as we take a look at the NFL upcoming schedule. As you can see, OTAs going on now until June 6th. And then June 14th to the 16th, we have mandatory minicamp. Of course, we have that Hall of Fame game coming up on August 4th. And it all starts, the Bills and the Rams kicking off the NFL season on September 8th.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.